Here we have the updated 2021 Mercedes-Benz E-Class facelift, and better than that, we've got both the base E200 Avantgarde as well as the range-topping E300 AMG line, the two variants that are available here in Malaysia. So in this video, we're going to cover all the key questions surrounding the new E-Class. Is it any better compared to the previous model? And how does it compare against its key perennial rival, the BMW 5 Series? And should you decide to buy one, should you go for the cheaper E200 or just go all in with the E300 AMG line? Well, actually, I'm just going to answer the last question right now. Always go for the E300. This review is brought to you by BH Petrol Infinity, the premium fuel that gives you more power and more mileage. Let's start with the pricing first, which is about the same as the previous model. The E200 goes for around 325,000 ringgit, while the E300 is about 50,000 ringgit more expensive at 375,000 ringgit. Now that is a significant difference. 50k is not really spare change for most people, but trust me, you do get a lot more for your money with the E300, which is why I fully recommend that one. I'll cover more details throughout this entire video. Now let's be honest, if you can afford an E200, you should be able to buy the E300 as well. If that is a bit too much of a stretch for you, then perhaps you shouldn't be buying a car in this price range in the first place. Compared to the BMW 5 Series, these two are priced very close to each other. This E200 goes against the 530e, while the E300 goes against the 530i. They are both within 10,000 ringgit of each other. But compare the two ranges together and you'll see that BMW and Mercedes-Benz have very different approaches for these two models. While both the 530e and the 530i look pretty much identical to each other, here Mercedes-Benz Malaysia has added a very clear separation between the two variants. Now that is good for those people who are buying the E300 because it does look a little bit more special than this, but it's less positive for those looking for the E200 because it's clear that you are buying the cheaper, less expensive model. This being the facelift of the W213 model, the biggest changes are of course on the outside. And again, Mercedes-Benz has gone for a very thorough visual makeover. But I think this round the facelift is much more successful compared to the W212 facelift. Here we have a much more significant visual overhaul compared to your regular facelifts. In come a whole new bumper, new grille, a whole different shaped headlamps, plus a brand new bonnet. The bonnet includes the power domes at the top, which in the past were exclusive to certain AMG models. Over here it's fitted to all models, even the base E200, which I don't think fits the rest of the car as well. Now obviously these two are very different from each other. The difference is night and day really. The E200 Avantgarde has a whole different front bumper, different grille, even the headlamps are different between these two. So clearly, like I said before, the E300 looks miles better in comparison. Personally, I think the vertical slats on the Avantgarde model looks awful, while the standard LEDs on the E200 look really cheap compared to the much more intricate looking multi-beam headlamps. It's worth noting that the traditional Mercedes-Benz radiator grille is no longer available here in Malaysia on the E-Class, but take a look at photos and I don't think we are missing out on much here. In terms of wheels, the E200 gets a set of 18s, while the E300 gets a set of 19s. But both designs do not sit well with me. The 18s are a little bit too small, a bit too plain for my liking, while the E300 19s may look good from afar, but up close there's this weird grey disc within the design. Now this is supposed to have aerodynamic properties around it, but you know, it just looks too plain weird for my liking. Another disappointment is the boring looking brake calipers and discs within it, not the cool looking cross-drilled rotors from previous AMG line designs, but at least the braking performance has been kept intact. What has not changed is the handsome side profile of the E-Class. I've always thought the W213 had the best proportions among Mercedes-Benz sedans. The C-Class have always looked a little bit too short and stubby at the back, and the S-Class is a bit too stretched, if you will. This is the perfect middle ground. The facelift has brought about major changes to the back as well, especially with this wide and slim new tail lamps. It's quite a big change to a degree where if you were to park the new and old car side by side, you would not think that this is a mere facelift. You might think it's an all-new model. They have achieved this without changing any sheet metal in the back here, which is quite amazing. But overall, the net effect, I'm just not a big fan of. The taillights especially has gone through a big downgrade in terms of detail. The old car had this glorious crystal glow effect within the lights, while this, with this small little strips of reflector lights, just looks cheap in comparison. Another big downgrade is the use of completely fake exhaust frames down there. Now those may look like exhaust outlets, but they are completely sealed in. The actual pipes are behind the bumper pointing downwards. If you're wondering, this has been done for the ease of repairability. If you were to get into a minor fender bender in the back here, with this design you are less likely to damage the actual exhaust system itself. You can just replace the bumper and your repair costs will be a lot cheaper. But then again, the cost of visual appeal is quite dramatic as well. The interior has seen a relatively small change compared to the exterior. The first thing you will notice is this brand new steering wheel design. This is taken directly off the all-new S-Class and C-Class models. Incidentally, this is also the third set of wheel fitted to this generation of the E-Class. And in terms of design, I don't think it sits very well compared to the obviously older set of design for the dashboard. But having said that, the steering wheel itself is really nice to touch, especially this thicker and meatier feeling AMG line steering wheel. All the new controls on the spokes are using capacitive touch systems, and to be honest, they are not the easiest to use. It takes a lot of getting used to. I personally think the older version works a lot better than this one. A much better change is the shift to MBUX user interface, which is now a touchscreen system replacing the outdated command online on the older cars. This is very easy to use with large icons, very easily recognizable, and even though the touchpad is still a little bit of a stretch for me, I think using this even while driving is less distracting than using the old rotary dials. What I don't really like is the implementation of this new trackpad over here. This is a little bit tricky to use, and I think it's quite hard to use this when you are driving. When you're stopped and you can concentrate fully, it's fine, but when you're driving, I think this takes a bit too much attention from looking at the front. The system includes Android Auto and Apple CarPlay like before, but now it only takes up a small portion of the screen instead of being full screen like the older cars. The connection, however, still uses a standard cable connection, and more specifically a USB-C cable. The rest of the cabin is pretty much the same as before, which is a good thing because the W213 has always had a very strong cabin. In terms of design, everything works well, everything holds up to the touch, and there are quite a few tweaks to make this facelift version better than before. A major change that I really appreciate is the use of wood material on this entire surface over here. The older pre-facelift model always used this glossy piano black setting over here, which is always a magnet for fingerprint and scratches and dust. This is a much nicer alternative. Also, in terms of build quality, certain tweaks have been made. This piece over here used to be really cheap plastic, now it's much nicely padded, even though the button is still rather cheap and tacky. Beyond that, the widescreen cockpit display is still very good, makes one hell of a first impression, and the multi-color ambient lighting system is second to none, still the best in the business. The seats are also extremely comfortable, very easily adjustable to your ideal seating position, even though the sitting position itself is still not quite ideal. Like in most modern Mercedes, the wheel itself is always slightly off-center to the left, and the wheel well is always a little bit too narrow for my personal liking. But having lived with a similar setup for the past 5 years, I have to say this doesn't really bother me that much once you get used to it. What has been improved behind the scenes are the Burmester sound system. Now this has always looked very good, but before this it was much more of a visual upgrade rather than a improvement in terms of audio quality. But now I guess there's some tweaks behind it. It sounds a lot better than before, even though it's still not quite to the level of the Harman Kardon system in the BMW 5 Series. Just like on the outside, the E200 looks and feels like the budget option on the inside. It gets a whole different steering wheel, the dashboard is no longer covered in leather, plus a cheap looking silver piece replaces the wood trim on the dashboard. Even the leather on the seats is of a lower grade, and you also lose out on the panoramic sunroof and the premium Burmester sound system. Here you get plain black speaker covers, which sounds just about okay and acceptable for this price range. As for the rear seats, I think the space over here is excellent, although I think it's a touch smaller compared to the BMW 5 Series. Having said that, the seats themselves are much more comfortable here compared to the BMW in my opinion. The backrest is better angled over here, and I think it's all more supportive for longer journeys to be sitting in the back here compared to the BMW. Like before, the rear bench is designed more for 2 rather than 3 abreast, which is a normal thing in this class of car. Beyond the seats, you get your usual aircon vents in the back here, and specifically for the E300, it also comes with a 3-zone climate control system, plus an additional set of aircon vents on the B pillar. This is great to blow straight to your face rather than coming from down there, but like I said, this is only for the more expensive E300 variant. One downside of choosing the E300 is the fitment of the panoramic sunroof, and this does cut down on the available headroom. If you're particularly tall, the E200 might fit you better in the back here. As for the boot, the Mercedes-Benz E-Class comes with a 540-litre space, which is far wider and much more usable compared to the BMW 5 Series. In terms of practicality, the E-Class is second to none. Now let's go for a drive. As usual, we'll start with all the numbers first. Both variants, the E200 and the E300, come with the same engine, a 2-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged motor. The E200 makes 197 PS and 320 Nm of torque, while the E300 is a fair bit more powerful at 258 PS and 370 Nm of torque. Both engines power the rear wheels through a 9-speed automatic transmission. That's pretty standard fare for Mercedes-Benz sedans. So in terms of numbers, the E200 is a fair bit less powerful compared to the E300 that we are driving over here. But tell you what, behind the wheels, there's pretty much not that big of a difference. In terms of full throttle acceleration, it takes up to 7.4 seconds for the E200 to reach 100 km per hour, while the more powerful E300 takes more than a second less at 6.2 seconds only. But like I said, that's only on paper. When you are driving out in the real world, you hardly ever feel the difference. I mean, yes, the E300 is still a little bit smoother, definitely more powerful if you really press on it, but for everyday driving, if you drive the E200 alone and not back to back against this one, you'll hardly ever think you need more than power it already has. So in terms of performance, you can pretty much ignore the differences between the E200 and the E300. The extra money that you're paying for, the extra 50 grand, goes to pay for all the extra bits that you're getting with the more expensive model. The full AMG line body kit, the bigger wheels, the much nicer interior, the leather dashboard, the better leather. So yeah, you can almost assume that the extra power that you get is a bonus really. If you have driven the earlier W213 models from say 2017 or 2018, this is a whole new engine that was introduced in 2019 onwards. The updated engine is far smoother, far more powerful, and especially in E200 trim, it has a lot more power in the lower end of the rev range. So if you're coming from say a 2017 E200, this, even though the numbers may sound very similar, it will be a big upgrade to that. It has to be mentioned, however, that these are still not the latest engines that Mercedes-Benz offers. In Europe, the W213 facelift comes with another new engine, the RM327k, but here we are getting the slightly older RM327k engines. Now, Mercedes-Benz Malaysia has chosen this older engine because of, fuel reasons or whatever. But, without having driven the new engines, I can't say much whether it's a big upgrade or even a downgrade. What I can say for certain is that the BMW 5 Series still has a much better engine and transmission, but that is more to say on the excellence of the 5 Series rather than this being poor. By any standards, this is very, very good. It's just that it's not as exceptional as the 5 Series. The combination of BMW's engine and of course the ZF 8-speeder is still superior compared to the Mercedes-Benz package. It's smoother, it's more powerful overall, and the transmission is definitely much better fit compared to this Mercedes-Benz 9G Tronic. This is always slightly slow to respond if you're asking for a quick overtaking maneuver, for instance. But beyond that, when you're just traveling around town, when you're cruising around, this transmission and engine is excellent. For fuel economy, there's pretty much no difference between the two variants. I've averaged between 9 to 11 litres per 100 kilometers depending on the driving conditions, which is pretty respectable for a car this big and this heavy. The fuel economy tests were carried out with BH Petrol Infinity, the fully imported premium petrol with maximum German additives for peak performance to give you more power, more mileage and more savings. The Mercedes-Benz E-Class is more competent rather than exceptional in terms of handling. It does the job, but you won't really have all that much fun behind the wheel. It's just not that kind of car. But it is still an improvement over the pre-facelift W213. The original W213 had a tendency to feel a little bit twitchy when you come across mid-corner undulations or highway expansion joints. That has been eradicated from this facelift. And overall, it just feels far more planted, far more stable across a variation of roads. This is quite a big upgrade. Now, unfortunately, we only get a choice of a single suspension setup here in Malaysia, just the base agility control suspension. So the old model, the E350, had a much more advanced dynamic body control system, which was adjustable between comfort, normal and sport, whereas in this car, there's only one setting, which is pretty soft. Now that means that there is no way to adjust the suspension depending on your driving conditions. So all the time, it's a little bit floaty, it's a little bit soft, you do get a fair bit of body roll through the corners. It's just not a dynamic kind of car. Compared to the 5 Series, it's a massive difference in favor of the BMW. The BMW somehow manages to be more comfortable and more dynamic at the same time, which is a bit of an embarrassment for the Mercedes-Benz E-Class. But that has more to do with the local specs of the Mercedes E-Class here in Malaysia. Had this car been fitted with the adaptive suspension, the difference would be far smaller. It will still be to the advantage of the 5 Series, but the difference will be a lot less significant. And as for handling, both the E200 and the E300 feel exactly the same to drive. The E300, despite the sportier looks, is no sportier to drive. Mercedes-Benz Malaysia, if you're listening, bring back the dynamic body control system. That would make the E-Class a much better car. Now on to ride comfort, and this is where you would expect the E-Class to excel in. And for the most part, it does. For highway drives, for highway cruising, this is super smooth, very comfortable. You can hardly find a better cruiser at any price range. But at low speeds, the ride can feel a little bit crashy, a little bit spotty, especially with the E300 with the bigger wheels and thinner tires. The E200 has less of an issue, it rides more smoothly compared to this E300, but yeah, it's still not the best in class either. But as speeds rise onto medium to high speeds, the ride levels out much better and then becomes a fantastic cruiser, as I said before. Now, the rather brittle low-speed ride is also an effect of the local specifications of the suspension here in Malaysia. Now, you see, with fixed dampers, the range of ability is a lot narrower compared to an adaptive system that is standard on the BMW 5 Series. So it is hard for Mercedes-Benz to make it comfortable at lower speeds and still as stable and as planted as it is at higher speeds. The fact that it has fixed the instability of the older car at higher speeds is still very much appreciated here. One last thing is refinement, and here the E-Class is very good, but again not exceptional. Wind noise is excellent. It only comes in above say 140, 150, and even then it comes in very gradually. It's not to the point of being intrusive. In terms of tyre roll, however, it's a bit on the high side, especially on the E300 because it's fitted with ultra high performance Goodyear Eagle F1 tyres. The E200 I tested comes with Michelin Primacy 3 touring tyres, so that is far quieter and also more comfortable as well. So in this regard, cruising at higher speeds can be a little bit annoying, a little bit more tiring than it needs to be, but overall this is still a fantastic highway cruiser. Helping that is the standard fitment of the full driving assist functions on the E300. Here you get the full adaptive cruise control system, active lane keeping assist, so if you're cruising on the highway, set all those functions on and you can really properly relax behind the wheel. It's still not a fully autonomous driving system, but once you've experienced it, it does make you feel a lot more relaxed behind the wheel. So like I said, As a highway cruiser, you cannot do much better than the E-Class at any price level. So that's the 2021 Mercedes-Benz E-Class facelift. Overall, this is a very good looking car with a fantastic cabin and a fine mix of comfort and handling. Plus, the facelift has also fixed quite a few of the flaws in the original W213 model. The only problem is the BMW 5 Series still manages to be more comfortable and more dynamic at the same time. So objectively, it's undeniable that this is the inferior machine. But thankfully, you buy a new car based on your heart and thoughts rather than just your brain and logic. And here, there is still a lot to like. Me personally, the brand cachet plus the more classy looking inside and outside makes this car my preferred choice. Because if I'm looking for a car like this, that means more to me than pure driving enjoyment. So what do you think of this review? Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you for watching and stay safe, everyone. This review is brought to you by BH Petrol Infinity, the premium fuel that gives you more power and more mileage.